So while we have people logging in, we're going to be checking in with our webinar panelists today and see where they're dialing from and what the weather's like today. So would you like to start, Dan?
Yeah, hi. Dialing in from Chicago, and the weather is getting warmer. It's getting
Oh,
better.
amazing. And what about you, Amy?
I'm dialing in from St. Paul, Minnesota, and we do have some sunshine today. It is like our third fake spring, bracing for snow overnight, though, I think.
Oh. And what about you, Nihara?
I'm in sunny Southern California, which is very welcome right now because we've had a couple of weeks of rain, much needed, but I'll take the sun.
Amazing. And I'm Blanca. I'm dialing from London in the UK, and today it's sunny and cold, so cannot complain. Um, so I think we have enough people logged in, so we're gonna get started. Hello everyone, and a huge thank you for joining us today for a discussion on riding the IC management career pendulum. The webinar will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the Lead Dev Slack to answer some of your questions in the hashtag StaffPlus channel. We may also have time to answer a couple of questions live, so please do submit those to the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we'll get to them. Right, so let's get started with some introductions. My name is Blanca, and today I'll be joined by Amy, Dan, and Nihara. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves. So could you please answer in just about 60 seconds who you are and tell us what makes you excited about this webinar. We're going to go in alphabetical order by name, and we'll start with Amy.
Hey everyone, my name is Amy Gebhardt. I'm currently an engineering manager at 1Password. I started my career as a full stack software engineer. I did that for about a decade before I reluctantly made the transition to the management path. And I've been in engineering management roles for about 7 years now. I reluctantly made the transition because I think, like many, I was hesitant to give up or lose some of my technical skills. I was definitely fearful of that. But at least in my experience, I have been pleasantly surprised to find the joy and energy in the balance between working with humans and working with technology. I'm super excited about this topic in general because I don't think we do super well as an industry at setting engineering leaders, both on the management path and the IC path, up for success. And I love the idea of doing better.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome. Next will be Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan LaFear. I'm a senior engineering manager at Grainger. I actually recently moved to this role, again with a little bit of reluctance, like Amy, from a senior IC role at Grainger. And that was about 6 months ago, so this is pretty fresh for me. I will say, though, previously I worked at ThoughtWorks for about 8 years, and I did sort of feel that continuous manager IC tension, given the nature of that style of work. So I'm really excited to talk about this because this has been on my mind for a long time, whether consciously or unconsciously. Thanks.
Great. Looking forward to hearing you. And lastly, Nihara.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Nihara. I'm an engineering manager at Posit, where I work on our Posit Connect product. Much like Amy and Dan, for most of my career, I held back from making the switch for fear of losing that technical side, and then not being able to know how to move forward after that. But my perspective changed seeing folks that I work closely with make a similar transition and be able to pendulum back and forth. And they encouraged me to do the same. And ever since, I've been especially interested in intentional steps that others are taking to make this career switch. So I'm excited to be here and share my experience and learn from everyone here.
Thank you, everyone. And I am Blanca, and actually, I'm your host today, but I actually went from engineering to manager and then back to engineering. So I might be plugging in some of the experience or maybe the thinking that led me kind of back to the IC path. So are you considering a career on a different track this year? It's not unusual to shift between management and individual contributor roles during your career. Now, however, as efficiency-focused companies strip out layers of management and with job security at its lowest ebb, these career decisions are fraught with more risk. So we're going to be looking to our panelists to offer us some insights. And we're going to structure the webinar into 4 different topics, with the first one being do engineering managers now have to be more hands-on? I'm going to be starting with Nihara. You have emphasized the importance of remaining technical as an engineering manager. How do you ensure you maintain enough technical depth to have meaningful conversations with your team while managing other responsibilities?
Yeah, I love this question. It's something that I continue to think about and personally want to work on for myself also. I've always appreciated having managers who have understood the work that I do well enough to be able to help me make informed decisions during our conversations, whether it's technical implementation or career choices or whatever it may be, right? And as a manager, I believe staying technically involved is essential to be able to provide that feedback to your direct reports and participating in discussions on the team and helping, just aiding in decision making. For me right now, the balance is to stay engaged in the implementation plans, but not really getting too much in the weeds in the code and making all of those technical decisions. I try to keep up with pull requests so I know where our code base is headed. I have our code base pulled down locally, and I have sort of pet projects that I work on that may never see the light of day, but then it just helps me feel like my skills aren't really atrophying there. And there's always a lot of reading. But it can be a struggle because there's so much information to consume. And now in my role, I have to be pretty selective about how I'm spending my time and what I'm focusing on. But I think really it's just accepting that even a little goes a long way. Anything that you can do to keep up your technical skills just is going to help you in the long run, and you've got to just accept that.
Thank you, Nihara. And now we're going to move on to Dan. And you mentioned that being a manager means acting as the last line of defense. And how do you find hands-on in this context? And how is this different from being an IC?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, +1 to the Nihara thing. I feel like I've written more code personally than I ever have now that I'm in an engineering management role, which feels kind of strange to me. Yeah, I think being hands-on in the engineering manager context is interesting because, and I think one of the draws to the role was solving problems differently. So I still find myself leaning on my ability to draw an architectural diagram or do some sort of technical writing, but I don't see myself being the first person to jump on the problem. I'm actually looking for who in the system is maybe the right person to solve the problem, or if the system is not offering somebody to solve that problem, trying to figure out who that needs to be. If I have to step in, I feel like maybe that's a problem. Whereas in the IC context, I remember being more like, great, is this a high enough priority for the business? And should I be working on it? And then actually just executing. And so it's been an interesting shift to be thinking about how do we engineer the system instead of participating in this acute solution that is needed right now. And whether that is an architectural solution, some sort of code solution, or working with the team on some technical dynamic.
Oh, thank you, Dan. And I like how you frame solving problems in a maybe different way, or you have almost like more tools at your disposal. Yeah, wow. And let's hear from Amy. How do you balance staying hands-on with technical aspects while focusing on people leadership during different seasons of your team, especially in the onboarding phase for new engineering managers?
This is an interesting one. I think it kind of goes back to both Dan and Nahara's responses here too. There's, if you try to write down what an engineering manager does, what are they actually responsible for? It's probably a pretty big list, and it probably changes from company to company, from team to team, and from season to season, right? Like this varies in a pretty significant way. When I start a new engineering leadership position, whether it's a new team or a new company, I like to start the conversation by being like, here's what I think I do, because it might actually be pretty different than the expectations they have for their engineering leader. I have a diagram I refer to, and you can imagine on one spectrum, there's the people leadership side, and on the other, there's the technical leadership side. If we're going all the way over on the people leadership side, you'll see administrative tasks like approving PTO or mentorship or coaching somebody through something. Then on the technical leadership side, you might see things like managing a backlog or making architectural decisions. And there's a whole lot that happens in between. And you can imagine that there's also overlap. when you think about like organizational planning across the board. That's a people leadership thing. And also your architecture might influence how you think about your organizational structure. When you think about the technical skills that you may need in the future for your platform or for your team, you might recognize a gap and might have to look through opportunities to grow your team members. So this people leadership and technical leadership side. And I think our senior IC partners have a very similar list on both the people leadership and the technical leadership side. As an engineering manager, a default to the people leadership side, and especially when I'm new to a team, or if I'm bringing on a new to management engineering manager to my team, I recommend that you really focus in on that people leadership side for that first season. The reason is it lets you build a foundation, build some trust with the humans who are reporting to you, lets you sit back and observe the dynamics of the team, the way folks interact with each other, and then you'll be in a better position to start engaging in the technical leadership conversations. As different seasons change over time, right? Like you can imagine if it's performance review season, you're probably, if you're doing good performance reviews, they take a lot of energy and time, and you're probably going to shift yourself to the people leadership side and not spend quite as much energy or time on the technical leadership side.
Amazing. Well, I was thinking, Amy, actually that framework that you shared when I became a senior IC, a principal engineer, that can also be applied. So there's a lot of overlapping responsibility. Even if I'm not doing kind of performance management, I'm still contributing to like feedback from other people, and I like how you say it's about being intentional, understand what others need from you, and then just kind of align your work with that. And yeah, I could have seen it really valuable for myself as well in the past. And okay, let's see if in the next topic for our conversation, and I see already some questions coming in. We're gonna check in on them after these questions. Our second topic for today is what are the implications of flatter company hierarchies for both ICs and managers? And we're gonna go back to Dan, because you discussed formalized peer relationships between engineering managers and senior individual contributors. How do these flatter hierarchies impact these dynamics, and what strategies can help ensure this collaboration without power struggle? Sorry, continues to be collaboration without power struggles.
Yeah. Influencing without power is a really interesting skill, and I felt fortunate to work on that. I think as ThoughtWorks, being a consultant, you have to convince and influence people without being maybe necessarily in charge of something or directly responsible for the outcome that is that your client is required to, or your client is pursuing. And I think in this, what I've noticed, at least for when I think about this question at Grainger, is that when I have a peer relationship with, when I was a senior IC, I had a peer relationship with a couple EMs, and I felt like I could solve problems without that power dynamic. And I think I was really fortunate to work with some great people that I don't even know if the power dynamic would play into how priorities were ultimately made or chosen or aligned. But I did feel like it was it introduced a different way to collaborate with them. And so I had, at least in the senior IC role, I was kind of given an explicit mission for something to work with a team, whether that was delivery of a particular objective or working with the team on some technical dimension. In this EM role, I'm excited that I get to now partner with senior ICs to accomplish those goals that I have with my teams. And so I think, like you said, feedback, super important. I need that. And it's so hard to get in the engineering management role, but it was so easy to provide in the senior IC role. And I think you have, even if I have the same technical acuity, I have to interact differently with my team. And so I really love the opportunities that kind of emerge when you think about a senior IC as a peer in that discussion and not just a part of the team, and the engineering manager kind of has to resolve the priorities. Like there's a partnership that I think is more formal that I really appreciate.
Yeah, I'm glad you highlight the importance of that partnership, because I think in the principal engineer role, you basically influence others. So your ability to create partnerships, not just with EMs, but with product, with other teams, with senior leaders, it kind of amplifies your impact. So I'm thinking, you know, there's skills that we're mentioning that are vital for EMs. They're also vital for principal engineers. There's kind of actually more overlap. It's just that you might use them in a slightly different ways. And so let's move now to Amy. And you highlighted the ambiguity between roles in flatter hierarchies. So how can engineering managers navigate unspoken expectations and biases while fostering high trust relationships with senior ICs?
As if there's an easy answer to this question. I think this is a really important question and a really important topic, especially as we're thinking about flatter hierarchies. There's something really appealing about that. There is something, maybe very organic relationships can be built from that. I think in an ideal circumstance, it's probably my preference. I like the idea of very authentic and genuine relationships forming. The challenge is we don't work in ideal and perfect work environments, and we are human beings, which means there's also going to be mistakes and biases and assumptions at play here. In my experience with some flatter hierarchies, it is harder, it creates more unspoken expectations and leaves some space for assumptions. I've had a number of times in my career where I show up and folks don't assume that I have 15 years of experience as an engineer. They don't assume that I can talk the talk, that I can help make architecture decisions or lead an infrastructure team. I have been asked, oh, you're here to, facilitate the meetings or to send the emails or to, have the one-on-ones and, focus on the well-being of the team. And while all those things are true and part of my job, it does all of us a disservice to limit our engineering managers in that way, and definitely to limit the folks who we think are part of underrepresented groups in tech to treat that way. I think I have a good friend who, when I worked with him in the past, would regularly say to me, hope is not a strategy. And as soul crushing as that might seem on paper, it's actually really helpful in thinking about, if we want these flattened hierarchies, if we want these high trust relationships to form, hope isn't the strategy here. Sometimes it does happen. You might get lucky, but really we have to work at building those relationships, about clarifying what those expectations are. I think in reality, our senior ICs and our EMs, their responsibilities are like a Venn diagram. And I think the anomalies to this is when they don't overlap at all or when they overlap completely. But because every team is unique, because those EMs are unique, because those ICs are unique, and because their relationship is unique, there isn't a one-size-fits-all to navigate this, which is why I think there really just isn't an easy answer to this question.
Yeah, it sounds to me that communicating is kind of that first thing that's going to set you up for success, and doing so regularly. And when you were mentioning biases, I was thinking, well, I remember a time that I spent just doing some tests to kind of check what are my biases, and then being a bit surprised and almost scared, thinking, oh, I have a tendency to this thing. I'm not gonna publish it in the world. But the more you're aware of your own, it becomes easier to maybe say in a room, hey, I have a tendency for X, Y, Z. Can you just check on me, or am I steering towards this? And then you put it in the room and people just relax, and they realize that it's almost like a safer space to just admit to things and just kind of be more honest. So thank you for that. I think now we're gonna, I see a lot of questions already in the Q&A, so thank you for this. I'm going to try to bring a few, and please, for our panelists, just unmute yourself, raise your hand, and I'll direct to those. The first one is, as an EM, how do you efficiently measure your dev performance? And it says annual assessment for bonus, salary increment, and promotion. It says efficiently. There's a really strong emphasis on that.
I love the idea of how how do we measure performance for our engineers? I will give a disclaimer right away that I do not think I do this efficiently. And that's really the spirit of the question. But I believe in extremely comprehensive performance reviews, annoyingly comprehensive, if you will. I think a version of this where just your manager writes their perspective is never going to tell you the whole story, or even just you and your self-review or your peer reviews. There's more. There's always more to that story. We also need to be really careful when we start bringing data into the equation. Are we looking at like Git statistics or Jira statistics or whatever that looks like? Yeah, sure. We can measure some of your productivity in the lines of code you wrote, I guess, and also maybe in the number of PRs you reviewed yourself. But none of those things on their own tell a clear picture. It's the combination of all these things that really give you a clear, comprehensive perspective on somebody's performance. And it also lets you validate some of your vibes and assumptions that you are picking up. My performance reviews that I do for my team always include a word cloud. The first time I was ever called extra was the first time that I attempted to do performance reviews for my team. But Dan, you mentioned this earlier, feedback is, as an industry, as a society, we're not that great at giving feedback, and yet it is so important and can really change a whole lot about an individual's career, about a dynamic as a team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just to build on that, I think that's your point about it being. I think it's hard. I think if there's worries about adding data to the system. I think I have been focusing a lot recently on trying to get my teams to submit each other feedback, and it's hard for a couple of reasons. I've noticed it being hard for a couple of reasons. One, finding the words that are actually useful to somebody are really tough. It's easy to say, Amy, you're so nice. I love pairing with you. It's like, those are nice things. You should say those things. But it's when you notice some friction in that, maybe that pairing relationship that you want to address, calling it out specifically is also helpful. And I've been working a lot on trying to let's get some quality, and let's get a lot of feedback through the system, and then I'll ask questions about it, because I don't want to get to the end of the year when we do that performance review that is this, what do you think about this person? You've maybe worked with them for a year, you maybe worked for them for 6 months, but guess what? You're going to write a piece of feedback that is defining for their performance review. I'd rather that be a collection of feedback over time that attempts to call out the things that are patterns of behavior and thematic, and try to have conversations with individuals to say, hey, if this happens multiple times, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what's going on. I think another thing too that I notice is that people don't recognize that you have to sell yourself a little bit. Like yeah, you have to take a little bit of ownership over your career, and you have to come to a one-on-one with, be engaged in that process. Like, think about what do I need to communicate? What are the signals that my EM has about me, and how can I either amplify those or make those clearer? Because I try to articulate all the time, like, I'm not watching you every day. I'm just not. But I do pay attention to your stand-up updates, and I care about how the quality of those things, and those things are good signals for me for how you are doing right now, or at least this year, or for some segment of time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, sorry,
Well,
one more to add to that. It's more of just an ongoing conversation. It can't be like we got to performance review and now we're passing on the feedback. Things that we noticed throughout the year, I feel like having that ongoing conversation just helps so that there's expectations are clear on all sides and there are no surprises.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Nihara. I'm gonna ask one more question from the Q&A, and then we'll move on and we'll tackle the rest of the questions later. The next question is, it says, my company is impact oriented and my manager keeps pushing my team to their limits to deliver as much impact as possible and destroy work-life balance. How do I handle this to keep work-life balance for my team without losing impacts expected by my manager? Because our salary and bonus depends on this. Wow.
I have a thought, and I hope this isn't too aggressive, but you should advocate for the work environment that you want, and then you should, I think, continuously ask yourself, is this where I want, is this where I'm getting happiness, like day to day coming to work, and make a decision on your long-term career based on that. And I think um, what I've noticed is that sometimes it's a question of fit. If this is not how you want to work, then maybe this is not the place for you. And I think that there's some psychological safety in being able to recognize that you can find there's other jobs. The market is, variable. It's easier or harder depending on your network. There are many variables, but I think if you remember that this is a job and you have agency to make changes to that, whether that's influencing the environment around you by providing feedback to your peers that couldn't be your manager, take charge of some of that. And I think sometimes it's you want to work a certain way and somebody else wants to work a different way, and those things are just going to collide.
I think something that I like to coach folks on as an engineering manager on this topic as well is the concept of sustainability. Being able to recognize when you are working at an unsustainable pace or your team is working at an unsustainable pace is really important information for your leaders to know, because it means something is off here and there is significant risk to working in an unsustainable pace. Because at some point, if somebody begins to experience burnout or is already there or past that point, that's going to have a detriment to your ability to deliver at the end of the day, right? For the whole team to be successful. As a manager, I'll coach against the hero culture in a lot of ways, because all of a sudden we end up in a situation where I've had somebody on my team who's like, I got it. They've got it all figured out. I don't maybe necessarily have the depth of understanding that I should as a leader to know like what it is taking them for them to be in a position to say, I've got it. But all of a sudden, when something changes, they aren't available, something shifts about their ability to work at that pace. I now have a gap I didn't even realize that I had. I think being able to talk about it in the form of sustainability and even tie it back to like the business goals is a message that your leaders should be welcoming and definitely open to hear. It's easier said than done. Yeah. Acknowledge that too.
I'd like to add something. I don't know, Mihara, if you wanted to speak or not. Well, I'll add something in the meantime. I think for me, from the perspective of, a senior, I see a principal engineer, and influencing is basically my diet. I think I'd go with the approach of trying to build common ground with the the senior leader, the high manager, trying to understand what's behind this push, and trying to kind of also ask maybe for what are the signals that are telling them that your team is not delivering that impact. Where's that data? And managing conflict is actually one of the things that is also kind of almost the other side of influencing. You have to manage through conflict, so you have to be okay having those hard conversations. And I know it can be a privilege to be able to stand up for yourself and your team, because for people, sometimes people feel a bit trapped in their jobs, or they just cannot afford to be fired. So for people who have greater options or maybe more financial security, this comes almost like as a given, like why wouldn't I challenge back? If you are a person that maybe cannot change jobs easily or have other limitations, or you are the breadwinner in your home, then this can be really hard. So I think it's have to take care of yourself, also think what are the things that are playing for me, and try maybe also to rally through other people that support. Okay, support yourself so you can better support your team, and learn to have those hard conversations is my advice, because you do learn a lot through that. And I think I'm gonna move on to the next set of questions for our webinar. Okay, for topic number 3, and then we come back to the live Q&A, because it's really good questions. So our third topic is, what should you consider before making the switch? And we're back to Amy. So you've mentioned adapting to different seasons of your team as a manager. How can prospective engineering managers evaluate whether their skills and leadership style align with the current needs of a team or a company before making this transition?
Yeah, I love the concept of seasons. I've referred to this a couple of times now. Early in my career, I was really stuck on this idea of finding a forever home, finding a company that I could work at, 20 years, and my career would grow alongside this company. And it's pretty quick in the tech industry that I realized that that probably was unlikely to happen. So I reframed this idea into focusing on seasons, thinking about a season that a company is in, or a team is in, or even the individuals on that team are in. You can think of a season as like, hey, we're navigating a period of significant ambiguity right now. We don't have any North Stars. We are building. Folks are going to be asked to do work that isn't in their typical job description, right? Like how, as a leader who's leading through a time like that, how do you measure performance when somebody is doing work outside of their job expectations? Another season might be a period of significant change. Maybe you're having a period of turnover and you're really focused on retention strategies for your team. Or maybe you're in a position where everything is like super predictable and stable. And like some might even argue boring, but that's what folks maybe want right now. And you're in execution mode. There's a really clear path. You know what that North Star is, and you know how to get there, and your heads are down and you're working on that. I think it's hard to identify what season a company is in, and you have to kind of anticipate and attempt to predict the future a little bit of where that company is headed or where that team is headed. And it's also hard to know what skills do you have as an individual that might be uniquely suited to the season that that team is entering. And then there's also the seasons that you like, right? The seasons that give you energy, that present the problems or challenges that you like to solve, or that you want to build the skills in to be able to support a team. I don't know that I have like a perfect recommendation for how to identify these seasons, other than to maybe start trying to frame it in that way. There is a set of questions I ask whenever I'm interviewing for roles. So maybe if you're considering interviewing for a new position, or even just like conversations that you might have on your current team, there are two questions I like to ask the different interviewers separately. It's not really meant to be any sort of test or trick, but it is helpful for me to get a sense of how folks respond, to see, where's their alignment, where is their inconsistency. And the two questions I asked is what is something that is working really well for the team right now? Think back to like the last 90 days. Humans aren't great about thinking beyond that. So let's say the last 90 days, what's something that's working really well for the team, and what's something that's not working really well. I think you'll learn things that are important to the team, that they're proud of, as the what's working well, and be able to identify maybe where they need help and support, and kind of match that up with, is that a problem you want to come help solve? Do you have the skills? Do you want to grow the skills to maybe help solve that problem?
That's very insightful. I was thinking also, for senior IC staff plus roles, I knew there was a breadth of, the roles are very unique, but I wasn't aware how for engineering managers, it's also very, very interesting. So yeah, I'm learning a lot today. Mihara, we're back to you. What advice do you give to ICs who fear losing their technical skills when transitioning to management? And how can they prepare to maintain their technical credibility while taking on people leadership responsibilities?
Yeah, I completely understand and relate to that fear. Like I said in my intro, like it was quite deep-seated for me at least. But I think the reality is that your technical skills are going to change when you switch to this role. There's a whole new skill set that you've got to focus on, and you just have to be intentional about how you stay engaged with the parts of the work that your team is on, that helps you make the right decisions, ask the right questions. I think you asked about maintaining technical credibility. And like I said earlier, like stay close to your work. It doesn't mean you're writing code all day, every day. You're not the one making the technical decisions. You have to empower your team to let them do that and come to you if they need help. But you have to stay informed, at least at the architectural level. And kind of like Dan said earlier, have that picture in your head of what does my system look like, so you can ask the right questions, help connect ideas across various parts of the systems, maybe not directly what your team is working on right now, and just support your team's technical growth. Partner with your senior ICs, like your staff plus engineers, and use them to help you make those decisions. And just accept that your role now is less doing and more enabling others to do their best work. Trust your own self. You have years of experience that brought you here. There's a reason why you're here.
Thank you for the very thoughtful answer. I was just kind of reflecting on my transition back from management to IC. And I think part of it was maybe, the expectations on myself, that I just hadn't had that conversation with someone who said, just focus on enablement. You don't need to know the answers. And I was at the same time still kind of dying to kind of, just like do stuff. And it was really, really hard. So I ended up deciding, well, for now, not never, for now, I'm gonna go back into the IC. And I think it naturally, maybe with what Amy was saying about the seasons, for me, it's like, for me, the season of like influencing is where I thrive. So yeah, I'm still in that season. It's a long one. Okay, now we're on to our last topic, and we'll be able to take some more questions after this. So uh, this the fourth topic, and what skill sets do you need to thrive in both roles in 2025? So this is both senior IC and engineering management. And Mihara, with the rise of flatter hierarchies and evolving expectations for engineering managers, what core skill sets do you believe are essential for thriving as both hands-on technical leader and a people manager in 2025?
Yeah, for me right now, as an EM, I guess the theme of everything that we've been talking about today is staying technically engaged while leading with clarity and influence, and just having that strong product perspective to make sure your teams are building the right thing. So it's a couple of threads there. So I guess I should try to break that down a bit. Technical acumen, the big one that we've all been talking about. Stay as close to the work as you can, to the architecture, understand the trade-offs, and that can just help guide the technical decision-making on your team. But bring that product perspective, because you need to be the person that's able to tie the technical work to what your customer needs and the business impact there, to help ensure that your teams are building the right thing. Communication, making sure your teams are aligned, help asking the right questions so you can help drive decisions with limited oversight and not being in the code base and very close to the actual work that's being done, advocating for the right priorities. Amy touched on this quite a bit, coaching your team. I think great managers enable their team to solve problems, grow their careers, and just take ownership over their work without having to lean on you for all of the decisions that need to be made. And that just gives you space to go do other things that you might want to focus on anyway. And I think most of all, continue to learn. This is tech. This thing's constantly changing. We have to keep up. IC, EM, no matter where you are, you have to keep up with what's going on in the space, but also with what your org needs and adapt accordingly. Just see what your org expects of you and do what you need to at that given time. Kind of ties into the seasons thing that Amy was touching on also. It's the org seasons in addition to what season I'm in that kind of plays into all this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And I love that. I think one of the best senior ICs I work with, I think they said once to me, you just have to learn to trust your own ability to learn stuff and continue learning. And once you have that trust in yourself, you realize that no matter what it is, jumping into engineering management or then picking up, a new project, you just know you can learn it. It will just take some time, but you know the process, you've done this before, and that's a really like a superpower. So last to finish today's questions for our panelists, Dan, you mentioned the importance of discussing technology at an appropriate abstraction level for managers. How can engineering managers refine their communication skills to bridge technical depth and high-level strategy effectively?
I feel like we should end it on Yara's answer. That was so much better than what I think I have to offer here. But I think this is a thing that I've been thinking about when I think about the EM role and the IC role, and I feel like I had to quickly adapt to. I'm not talking about how a web server maybe needs to be configured, but I am talking about. I still need to understand my HTTP API contract and how we're changing that and the impact that it may or may not have on our customers. I don't have to understand the specifics of how we need to change that, but I do want to be engaged in that conversation because I know that's going to have an impact across all of our consumers or maybe some downstream events that we produce. Like at the edges of our system, I want to make sure that I can talk about with some technical acuity about the details of how those things are changing and at least understanding why. I don't know that I need to be able to articulate or be the person that is making the technical decision or making the strong technical argument, but being able to at least know that what good looks like when I am looking at a technical argument for some sort of change. And so I think this has been a big focus for me is thinking about how when we go back to technical writing and architectural diagramming, I find those as useful tools to help convey my thoughts at what I believe is the right level of abstraction. But I'm for sure still working on this. I don't know that I'm going to always get this right, but I think there's something about this relationship that I don't want to bring a developer to a conversation. I notice sometimes engineering managers or leaders will bring a developer to have a technical discussion, and there's certain discussions that I just want to talk about, the producing and consuming of events or something about the boundaries between our system that doesn't implicate the details too much.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's knowing but that level of kind of technical detail and not going just like deep down into things. So it's quite critical. Okay, so we're gonna grab some questions from the Q&A. Okay, and we had a great one actually submitted to the webinar insights when people subscribe, and they were saying, given the current trend of efficiency focused companies stripping out management layers, how has this impacted the perceived job security in management roles? And what strategies can managers adopt to navigate this uncertainty?
For me, it's the adaptability piece. I think that should just be core to our careers in general. Read the room, read the space that you're in, do what you need to do to fit in, I guess, yeah.
I think one of the jarring shifts that I made as I moved into management after being an engineer for so long was the lack of quick, immediate feedback. I could see that my pull request was merged, and I could see that a thing worked or it broke. And having that quick feedback was really helpful to know, like, hey, I'm on the right track. I'm doing my job really well. Gets a lot harder in management. Sometimes you don't get to measure your impact until a year after you measured a decision, or maybe even more than that. And I think that makes it also a little bit more challenging for us as engineering managers to communicate the value that we bring to teams. And as we're thinking about, if there's this push to be like, do we really need managers? Is that a thing? Are we sure that they're showing up and bringing value to the team? For us to be able to talk about our impact as individuals, I think it does, is a good thing for us as individuals, but also benefits our team. I think the one other thing that I think about here, especially in an engineering management concept, if we go back to that diagram that I talked about, where you got the people leadership side and the technical leadership side, the term systems thinking that we love to use as a buzzword in the industry. And we often refer to the system being like a platform, right? Or multiple platforms. And systems thinking is understanding the platform as a whole and how things will impact each other across the board. When we think about engineering managers and their systems thinking, and I think that this is true for our senior level ICs as well, we're not just thinking about the architecture or the technical system. We're thinking about across the board. How does this organization grow? How does it evolve? How do I make space for the people on my team to grow and evolve along with this technical development and evolution that we're doing? The systems thinking is more holistic in a lot of ways. And maybe you're not going quite as deep into the technical systems thinking. That's why you've got a partner who's also going in deeply. But without you being a member of that team for that systems thinking and being able to talk about that impact that you can have, it really sets up the team for a very different future without that role.
I love that, Amy. Thank you. That's such a nice way to kind of close the questions. I know there's a lot of questions in our Q&A, and we're going to be taking them onto Slack. But I'd like to take a minute to thank our panelists for sharing their insights. And now it's time to just wrap up. So let's just please go around the room and just summarize in a sentence, what is your top tip for someone who's considering riding the career pendulum? We're going to go in reverse alphabetical order now, starting with Nihara.
Let go of the fear and just give it a try. You might like it. If not, you can always go back. I think like you touched on, Blanca, we're engineers. We can learn, we can see those patterns, and pick up a new thing when we need to. I think we've got to just trust ourselves some more and give it a try without letting things hold us back so much.
Fantastic. Now, Dan?
I think at number two, I would say that that's number one. Number two, maybe I think the thing that I did a lot of reflection on how I like to solve problems. Do you like to solve problems in system thinking context, or do you like to solve acute problems? Do you like that quick dopamine hit? And I think where do you find yourself trending towards? I think that will give you some insight into maybe where you are in your season. Like, is this the season of engineering management, or is it the season of being an individual contributor? So I think that's a reflection that I did as I was making that switch.
Love it. And wrapping up, Amy.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a different take. I think really understanding the expectations of each role at the company or at the team, recognizing that they may shift what those expectations are, kind of to Nahara's point, the adaptability. And to just recognize that there's often an overlap in responsibilities, which means if some of this is interesting to you, the people leadership side is interesting, you can still do that as a senior IC. I think being able to focus your efforts on the role that's most likely to be the space to give you energy, to Dan's point as well.
Thank you. Fantastic. I think what's stayed with me is actually that concept of the seasons and applying that to yourself and thinking it's not the end of the world. You know, you're not going against anyone for trying out something else. And it's almost like in our industry, we like these like definite answers. Oh, now I'm in management and that's the end of my career. And I'm thinking, well, maybe not. So just give yourself a little bit of leeway. You might just enjoy, like Nihara mentioned. So thank you so much for all the good insights in today's panel. We're going to be heading now over to the Lead Dev Slack in the hashtag Staff Plus channel. So please head there to continue the discussion. Our panelists will be answering your questions there. We'll be back in July for our July 9th for our next Staff Plus webinar. But if you want your Staff Plus fill before then, keep an eye out for our roundtable in June, where we bring together a group of individual contributors to discuss current challenges and top tips. Lead Dev are also hosting their flagship event in London this summer called LDX3. It's the Festival of Engineering Leadership with talks across 3 stages. You can hear from engineers at top organizations who have shaped their roles, built influence, and driven impact. You can connect with other Staff Plus leaders to structure discussions and dedicated networking, and explore the tools and strategies shaping the future of engineering leadership. Tickets are available to purchase now. Thank you everyone for joining, and we hope to see you next time.